Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, let's talk about a boxing story right now. You know, veterans stay in the game, right, late in their careers. Guys who know they have the knowledge base, know they have the skill level, the know-how, but who also are aware that they're not the athletes they were in their prime, right? They know that the version of themselves from 5 years ago would beat who they are today, but they also know that they know what to do in a ring. They might have a better understanding of the sport. So you have a lot of veterans in the sport hanging around past their expiration dates, right? Hoping to fight some unprepared younger lion, right? In a fight that could then vault them back into the contender ranks. Now, one of these, we'll call them older masters, right? Guys who've had past glory, is Maliganaggi, right? Trust me, Maliganaggi has many other things he could be doing with his time, including working as a boxing commentator, where he's excellent. But Paulie's still in the ring, right? He's still accepting fights. Why? Because while he knows he's older, while he knows physically he might not be the man he used to be, he knows he's never been as sharp as he is right now mentally, right? I'm sure he learned from his first fight. I'm sure he's learned from his last fight. I'm sure Maliganaggi thinks that with the right opportunity, he could beat an unprepared opponent and be right back in the championship race. So Maliganaggi thinks he's found that unprepared opponent, right? And I believe this opponent is well represented, right? His management group knows what they're doing. And that opponent is David Peralta, the guy who just beat Robert the Ghost Guerrero, right? Think about it. The Ghost is one of boxing's box office gems. You'd be surprised at how Robert Guerrero fills arenas, right? Understand, very few people in boxing can draw. Even some of the big names can't draw crowds. But Robert the Ghost Guerrero can draw a crowd. So, David Peralta, who by his own admission was a cab driver, right, beats him. So now here's Maliganaggi saying, hey, I have a name. I can draw a crowd. People know me. David Peralta, fight me. Give me an opportunity. Right? Here's the catch, and it's a big catch. David Peralta has on his team Samson Lukowitz. You need to know that name because he was the advisor to Sergio Martinez. In other words, this is an experienced advisor who I'm sure is very aware of the fact that sometimes the most popular opponent in a division might be the guy who just scored the upset. Because you have a lot of champions who want to fight an opponent who is in the public imagination, right? It's easy to sell a fight when you say, hey, I'm fighting the guy who beat Robert the Ghost Guerrero, right? Fans don't need to know who David Peralta is. They just need to know what he's done, right? Keep in mind, too, I know you're hearing a lot of conflicting information about Kell Brook's future plans, right? Kell Brook is saying, hey, maybe I will fight Errol Spence after I fight Golovkin. Yeah, right. Okay. Just understand that there is a distinct possibility that Kell Brook has fought his last fight at welter. Right? Understand, they might need to go around and look for an opponent for Errol Spence. Right? Other champs want to stay relevant. Right? Keith Thurman, I'm sure, wants to stay relevant. If I were Samson Lukowitz and David Peralta, rather than try to fight one of these older masters, a Paulie Maliganaggi, who people may know, but who isn't viewed right now as in the mix for a championship fight. If I were David Peralta, I'd swing for the fences. There are enough people at 147 pounds, in my opinion, with belts, for David Peralta to say, hey, I'm here. Give me a title shot. If you feel my victory over Robert the Ghost Guerrero was a fluke, then great. I'm an easy payday for you. Right? But give me the title shot. If I were part of the management group of David Peralta, that's what I would hold out for. Peralta's in his early 30s. Right? It's the dream, I would say, of the vast majority of fighters to be a world champion. Right? I'm not necessarily saying that Peralta's ready to hop in the ring with Keith Thurman or whoever. But what I am saying is that if the opportunity presents itself and you've been fighting a long time and you've already lost a couple of matches, right? Even your win over Robert the Ghost Guerrero was, I believe, a split decision. Right? If the opportunity to fight for a championship presents itself, I would take that opportunity. Don't fight a young lion who might be hungry and who might just be more physically dominant. Don't fight an older master who literally has been waiting by the side of the road, just like a cop trying to bust a speeding motorist, right, for exactly an opponent like you. So a guy like Paulie Maliganaggi can come in the ring, show us that his jab is still one of the best in boxing, right, and get himself a title shot by beating you. No, you've earned the opportunity right now by beating the Ghost. A lot of boxing is about box office and public awareness. I believe champions at 147 pounds understand that, a fight against the guy who beat Robert the Ghost Guerrero will probably pay a few bills. Right? So just food for thought. But just understand, whatever happens with David Peralta, he's getting great advice. Really, in boxing, you need to know not just the fighters, but the advisors. Right? The Al Haymans, the Cameron Duncans, the James Princes, the Oscar De La Hoyas. Right? You need to know all of the people who have a fighter's ear. Right? Nacho Beristain. Keep in mind, we don't have to focus on titles. We don't have to say, well, isn't Oscar a promoter? Isn't Nacho Beristain a trainer? Right? Freddie Roach. You and I know that there's certain people who fighters check with. Right? Teddy Atlas, who fighters check with before they accept fights. Right? There are people who have influence in the sport of boxing, right? Let's just say that David Peralta's with a good group that's going to give him sound advice. And just from a risk-reward perspective, I hope Peralta's next move is to fight for the title at 147. And as I've always said, whether you're overmatched or not, right? If you're in the ring with the champion, you're literally one punch away from being the champion. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about Roman Gonzalez. Many people feel he might be the best fighter in the sport pound for pound. And he's moving up in weight to fight Carlos Cuadras, right? A guy who hits hard, who will come inside and throw a lot of shots to the body, right? A smaller man against a bigger free swinger What could possibly go wrong? Well, let me say this. First, let me talk about what makes Roman Gonzalez great. And he's a great fighter, folks. Right? You want to see greatness, look at his fights. Understand, he's been a prodigy for a long time. You sniff around YouTube long enough, you're going to see videos of him with Alexis Arguello, right? One of the very best, boxing legend. And you're going to understand that Arguello spent time with this young fighter because Arguello understood the talent level, right? Well, let me say this. First, a fighter who is able to be offensive, extremely offensive, in a defensive shell, that's very hard to find. Now, I know as you're watching him fight, he's very structured. Very structured fighters tend to be a little bit boring, right? When we see great defense, we're expecting it to be some guy who has head movement, can fly naked, can make you miss without having his hands up, can leave the script behind and ad-lib, right? Just like great actors. You're watching, a movie and you could tell that certain actors are ad-libbing and they understand the character in the moment enough to ad-lib. That's not Gonzalez, right? If you're looking for that kind of defensive mastery, you need to look up Nicolino Loche or the best defensive fighter I've ever seen, Pernell Whitaker, right? Those are guys who are reading you and reacting, what I call adaptive reactive, right? They're seeing you, they're moving out of the way. For most fighters, to be effective defensively, you need a construct, right? You need to have your hands up. You need to stand a certain way. You need to do things. The idea is that you're not going to leave yourself open until you throw a punch, and even that window is going to be a small window because you're going to throw the punch and you're going to bring your hand back, right? You don't want a jab that lingers because that leaves you open for counters. You want to protect yourself at all times, right? So the door should be shut. When it's open, it's just for a short punch, just for a brief moment. Now, somehow, Gonzalez, and it's striking. It's striking. You see him, and he has his hands up. He, almost looks like he's rope-a-doping in the middle of the ring. Right? But understand, while he has his hands up and stuff, here's his greatness. He's reading you. So then when he opens up, right? He doesn't leave himself too open. But you'll notice that he'll do things like drop a shoulder, throw a punch to the body, then come back with the same hand, throw an uppercut, right? Unveil his own two-handed attack, right? Literally, be out there throwing a high volume of punches while still in a defensive stance, while still returning his hand to the side of his head, not leaving himself open. He's always structured. Now, it's for that reason why I feel he beats Carlos Cuadras. Because while Cuadras is bigger, and while Cuadras hits hard, Cuadras doesn't have Gonzalez's structure. You'll notice Cuadras is, like Pernell Whitaker, a guy who, will literally stand there and try to dodge your punches without a hand up. Will literally just try to dodge your punches so he could come back inside and throw his. But let's just say he's not Pernell Whitaker. Right? So while Whitaker could dodge your punches and wave at you and, not get hit, right? In my opinion, Cuadras is going to get hit. Now, I'm not saying Gonzalez has the punch, although Gonzalez has a lot of power. I'm not saying he has the punch that Cuadras has. What I am saying is when Cuadras throws his punches, he's going to hit Gonzalez's arms. Gonzalez is a master of having his arms in the way. He's going to run into Gonzalez's defensive construct. Whereas when Gonzalez throws his punches, in my opinion, Cuadras is going to be open. In other words, Gonzalez's defensive construct allows him to get deeper in the pocket than most fighters, because he knows that as he starts to throw, when the bullets start coming back, he's wearing body armor, right? This is kind of like Floyd Mayweather, right? There's a difference between Mayweather and Pernell Whitaker. I know a lot of people compare the two. Mayweather's a defensive genius as well. But like Gonzalez, Mayweather has a construct, right? He has his head tucked. He knows punches from this side are going to miss because of the angle, right? Because of how I'm standing and stuff like that. He's not trusting his reflexes to the extent that a Pernell Whitaker does, right? It's the same thing with Roman Gonzalez. Gonzalez wins by design, right? He's always standing, and I mean always standing, in a defensive shell. His mastery is that he's learned how to be offensive with both hands out of it, right? I expect Cuadras to be so open that I personally would not be surprised if Roman Gonzalez gets a stoppage in the fight against the bigger fighter. Understand, when a bigger fighter faces a smaller fighter, that bigger fighter really does believe that he could push the issue, right? The fantasy is that the smaller fighter is just going to be overwhelmed by the size, right? Just overwhelmed by it. The reality is that Roman Gonzalez has a defensive construct where you're going to have a hard time finding him even as he stands in front of you. And because Gonzalez throws a myriad of punches, in other words, you protect the outsides, Gonzalez is throwing uppercuts. You protect the insides, Gonzalez suddenly is throwing punches from, let's say a 45-degree down angle, right? So this is a special fighter. He's unbeaten for a reason. And that reason is because he's a master. He's challenging himself by moving up in weight. I think he's going about it the right way. This is the kind of guy, right? Guys with constructs can move up and down in weight more easily than guys without constructs, right? To the Kell Brook crowd, Kell Brook relies a hell of a lot on his reflexes. A hell of a lot. Right? The point I'm making here is that a guy like Roman Gonzalez doesn't. Right? Kell Brook's leaning away to get away from punches. Right? Roman Gonzalez has hands up. He's reading angles. He knows to roll because he knows when he stands in front of you a certain way, you can only do so much with a certain hand. Right? Let me say this too. Golovkin. You saw this in the Daniel Geale fight. Golovkin's all in. His defensive construct drops when he's trying to tee off. He's open for counters. Right? Roman Gonzalez isn't. If you want to see a guy who can literally empty the gun with both hands, but who always makes sure that he's in a position where you really can't hit him flush coming back. You really have to thread the needle. You really have to, he'll throw a punch and he'll roll like this. You really have to find a way to anticipate what he's doing, and that's easier said than done. Then I hope you look at Roman Gonzalez. In other words, there's a gap, technique-wise, just like there's a gap punching-wise, between Golovkin and Gonzalez, right? Let's just talk about two of the best fighters in the sport pound for pound. Golovkin's really heavy-handed, right? It's a gift. I'm telling you, big punchers are born, they're not made, right? No one really hits like Golovkin in the sport of boxing, except maybe Kovalev and Saul Alvarez, right? We're talking about power with both hands. I'll agree. At heavyweight, Anthony Joshua is blessed with huge punching power in both hands, right? Wilder has huge punching power in one hand, right? I'll agree Vladimir Klitschko has huge punching power in both hands. Okay, but outside of heavyweight, I would make the argument that the biggest punchers in the sport are probably, we'll call them three wise men, right? Golovkin, Kovalev, Canelo, right? I view Canelo, by the way, as more of a puncher than anything else. Just food for thought, right? So there's a gap between Gonzalez and Golovkin when it comes to punching power, right? Golovkin has made a deal with himself because his punching power can literally end a fight. One punch. I believe it's by design that he comes in and leaves himself open so he could get as much of his body into the shot. Now, by contrast, Chocolatito, Roman Gonzalez, has a big punch for his weight class. He does. Look at the knockout ratio. But he's different, right? He sacrifices a little punching power to make sure that he doesn't leave himself open. So if Golovkin had better defense, he would look more like Roman Gonzalez, right? If Gonzalez decided to give up some of his defense, he could load up on punches, he would look more like Golovkin, right? Just understand it's a risk-reward type of thing, right? Roman Gonzalez is on the side of having a construct that protects you at all times, right? This is while being an offensive fighter. That's brilliant stuff, right? I can't take seriously any list of the best fighters in the sport that doesn't have Roman Gonzalez in the top 5, right? An argument can be made that he belongs in the top 3 of any list because he's combining mastery with power, right? I'm expecting him, despite him coming up in weight, to beat Carlos Cuadras. I wouldn't be surprised if it's what if it's one-sided, and if Gonzalez wins it by KO. Understand, the casino already has Gonzalez as the favorite in this fight, even though he's moving up in weight. Cuadras, to his credit, is saying that he's going to make size an issue. So you should expect a very robust fight. You should expect Gonzalez to have a bigger man in front of him throwing volume early, But I'm guessing by the 5th round, you're going to notice that Cuadras' punches aren't landing, and that Gonzalez, who is able to make adjustments, has cracked the code. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.